1920, W.E.B. Du Bois ended the world to run a measurement. He wrote a story where the color line goes down with New York City, or seems to, and climbs back before the bodies are cold. The story's called The Comet, and it's the final prose chapter of Darkwater, a book that mixes political essays with poems and parables. A black messenger named Jim gets sent down into the bank's lower vaults after 2 old volumes of records, and the narration makes it plain why him. The work was too dangerous for more valuable men. While he's under the ground, the tail of a comet passes over the city, and when he climbs back up, everyone he can find is dead. Comet or devil, Jim can only guess. The man whose life, in the narration's bitter arithmetic, priced out below 2 books of records, walks out into a dead New York, takes food from a famous hostelry, a grand hotel, up Fifth Avenue, and as he forces it down, he says the sentence that carries the whole story. Du Bois wrote, quote, "Yesterday they would not have served me," end quote. Sit with how strange this is. The author of The Souls of Black Folk put an apocalypse at the end of a book about voting rights and school budgets. In 2000, the anthology Dark Matter included it in a retrospective lineage of black speculative fiction. But why is it there, in Darkwater? The explanation that can feel sufficient is that it's an oddity stapled to a protest collection. I think the essays in the apocalypse are one argument, and this episode has to earn it. The essays keep asking who gets counted as fully human, counted where the rules get made, counted when the money is divided, the servant, the woman, the child. The story asks what it would take for that counting to actually happen, and its answer is the end of the world. Even then, only for a few hours. So, the question: what does Du Bois demand a democracy do about the people it won't count? And why does the color line survive everything except, briefly, the apocalypse? The route runs through a kitchen door, a ballot box, a census table, a school budget, and back up to a tower roof above a dead city. Start at the kitchen door, because Du Bois does, and because the scene is almost comic until it isn't. He's just finished a lecture on the disfranchisement of his people, on how they were being stripped of the vote and the say in society, in politics, in industry. A lady, as the chapter styles her, has been lying in wait through the whole thing. She comes at him, spitefully shakes a finger in his face, and asks the author of the lecture her one burning question. Du Bois wrote, quote, "Do you know where I can get a good colored cook?" End quote. The instinct is to laugh. Then you realize nothing here is funny. He's just described a people locked out of the polls and the factories, and her answer is to demand he staff her kitchen. For years, she says, she's funded Hampton and Tuskegee, the schools that train black students for work and trades, and still, she can't hire decent help. The graduates dream of law offices and medical degrees and, spitting the word in venom, of being ladies. His reply, on the page, is 2 words: God forbid. Then he ran, his word, ran, home and wrote the chapter. And it refuses to treat her question as small. Why in the century of the machine does America still keep a servant caste? And why is it black? He answers, from his own record, as a servant and a servant's son. At 20, between Fisk and Harvard, needing travel money before his scholarship came due, he carried trays in a Minnesota resort hotel and watched a waiter he calls intelligent and deft play the clown for tips. Crouching, grinning, slipping into a broad dialect, though the man usually spoke good English. Something froze in Du Bois. Then and there, he writes, he disowned menial service for himself and for his people. Then the arithmetic, his printed figures. In 1860, by his count, 98% of Black Americans were servants and serfs. By 1910, 21% were in service and falling. The lady read that flight as laziness. His numbers read it as escape. And organized labor, he charges, barred the exits, kept Black workers out of factory and trade so the kitchen stayed the door the world held open. He even gives the arrangement a name, the manure theory of social organization. Manure, because the theory treats a whole class of people as fertilizer, something you spread at the bottom so that life above it blooms. Then he writes the sentence the chapter has been building toward. Du Bois wrote, quote, "We push below this mudsill, the derelicts and half men, whom we hate and despise, and seek to build above it democracy." End quote. On the page, that last word carries an exclamation mark. The mudsill, the lowest timber of a house, the one that sits on the ground. We've decided some work is filth, he's saying, pushed a caste of people down onto it, and built our freedom on their backs. And this is not a plea to be kinder to the help. Du Bois calls personal service holy. The crime is what we've made of it. Degraded work for degraded people, sealed off by race. What he wants is a world where the service survives and the caste dies. Service without servants, as he puts it. Look under your own floor and see who's holding it up. And keep Jim in mind. The story waiting at the end of this book opens with the bank running the same arithmetic. The kitchen door opens onto the ballot box because the servant question and the voting question are the same question wearing different clothes. The chapter called Of the Ruling of Men reads like the book's philosophy of democracy, and it starts with the list. Everyone the world has ever agreed to exclude from rule. Du Bois wrote, quote, "The ignorant, the inexperienced, the guarded, the unwilling," end quote. I keep circling back to that list because Du Bois reads it not as a set of standards, but as a confession. Here's his logic. Ask who wrote each entry. In every case, it was the people already in power. And in every case, the entry protects their power. So the list doesn't describe who's unfit to rule. It describes what rulers say when they don't want company. Take the most respectable one. The ignorant shouldn't vote. Sounds reasonable, right? Du Bois flips it. People don't become fit to rule and then get power. They become fit to rule by ruling. The vote, for him, isn't a diploma you earn first. It's the school itself. A state that waits for its excluded to be ready has arranged for ready to never arrive. But the deep argument, the one the whole book stands on, is about what a government can know. Even the best aristocracies, he says, failed not from corruption, but from lack of knowledge. The rulers couldn't feel where the country hurt. Here's the whole case in one plain sentence. Du Bois wrote, quote, "He knows when something hurts, and he alone knows how that hurt feels," end quote. He, meaning any person, however humble. That sentence is doing precise work. It says the most basic fact a government needs, where its people hurt, exists in exactly one place, inside the people themselves. Only the person inside the hurt has the knowledge a government needs. Now hold on, because the strongest objection here isn't the racist one. It's the benevolent one, the guardian who genuinely cares. Du Bois grants the good faith. Most husbands, fathers, and brothers, he says, will look after the women in their lives as far as they know how. That's the trap, as far as they know how. The caring proxy still can't feel the hurt from inside, so the guardianship runs on guesswork, and the guesswork hardens into rule. His proof is the South itself, whose benevolent guardianship, he observes, delivered anarchy and exploitation to the people it claimed to protect. So exclusion isn't just unfair. It's a lobotomy the state performs on itself. And Du Bois doesn't flinch from the price. Letting the excluded in will cost something, he concedes. Confusion, inexperience, years of annoyance. He simply insists the ignorance of exclusion costs more. Then he turns the blade the other way, at his own side's comfort. Majority rule can be a tyranny too. A majority that crushes a minority, which can never become one, is just monarchy with more shareholders. Women, he points out, will rarely outnumber men at any poll. Artists will never outnumber anyone. And Black Americans are 1 in 10. The cure he sketches isn't less democracy. It's more of it. Minorities called to counsel. He's sketching, not engineering, and an honest listener will notice. One more thing, because honesty demands it. In this same chapter, writing in 1920, he calls revolutionary Russia, quote, that greatest experiment in industrial democracy which the world has yet seen, end quote. Industrial democracy meaning the workers themselves ruling the world of work. That sentence is praise, and it's the kind of claim his own rule should test. Run his own standard at it. What testimony from the people inside the experiment would his principle require first? The chapter doesn't ask. The standard does. And that's a point for the standard. The demand is bigger than the man. Not inclusion as charity, inclusion as knowledge. The excluded aren't asking the state for a favor. The state is blind without them. And blindness, hold on to this, is the story's engine. Julia's world seldom thought of Jim at all. If the excluded carry knowledge, the next chapter names a vast body of it. The Damnation of Women is Du Bois's chapter on Black womanhood, published in 1920, the year the 19th Amendment gave American women the vote, on paper at least. Whether a Southern registrar would honor it is a question the book's own disfranchisement chapters answer grimly. The chapter opens with a trap. The world, he says, sets out to worship virgins and mothers both, and winds up scorning the mothers while it preys on the virgins. Most modern women, he writes, can bear children only at the sacrifice of intelligence and their best work. That forced choice is the damnation of his title. Then he turns to the women the worship never even pretended to reach. The world that wills to worship womankind, he writes, studiously forgets its darker sisters. And what those darker sisters were already doing is the part he needs you to see. Black women were carrying the day's labor long before anyone praised them for it. His reading of the 1910 census. Out of 2.5 million Black homes, 2 million women and girls, everyone past the age of 10, walked out the door to work every morning. Independent and approaching economic freedom, he calls them, and he estimates their hands raised 3/4 of the property of the Black church. He doesn't pretend the independence came free. The same chapter counts its cost in his own worried voice. Broken families, what he calls a mighty dilemma, the unhusbanded mother or the childless wife. He honors the independence and dreads its price in the same breath. And somewhere in these pages, he prints a sentence credited only to one of our women, no name attached. The sentence appears in Anna Julia Cooper's A Voice from the South from 1892, and it may be the clearest statement of the whole argument. She wrote, quote, "Only the Black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage. Then and there, the whole Negro race enters with me," end quote. When the least counted person is finally counted, everyone is. His roll call runs on that logic, in his telling throughout. Mum Bet, a cousin of his own grandmother, among the first enslaved people declared free under the Massachusetts Bill of Rights. Harriet Tubman, who he says led over 300 people out of slavery without losing one. And he also notes a standing $10,000 reward for her. The total is disputed. Modern accounts describe about 13 return trips and roughly 70 people she brought out. But the force of his account was never the arithmetic. It's that she kept going back. And Sojourner Truth in the story Du Bois retells from Wendell Phillips. Frederick Douglass has just thundered that hope is gone, that freedom must come by blood, and he sits down. From the very front seat, Truth stops the hall with 4 words. As Phillips remembered it, she said, quote, "Frederick, is God dead?" End quote. 4 words, a century of argument inside them. And then the register drops. Du Bois lists much he's prepared, at the Last Judgment, to forgive the white South. Slavery itself, he says, is a world-old habit, and he'll forgive it. And then, the one thing he will not forgive. Du Bois wrote, quote, "One thing I shall never forgive, neither in this world nor the world to come. Its wanton and continued and persistent insulting of the black womanhood, which it sought and seeks to prostitute to its lusts." End quote. To my ear, that's the moral peak of the book, and he put it in the chapter about the people the Republic counted least. And behind the woman stands the child. The immortal child is his education chapter, and Du Bois doesn't open it with a budget. He opens it with a life, because the life is the argument. Samuel Coleridge Taylor, in Du Bois's telling, the father, a black surgeon from Sierra Leone, failed to find his footing in London and disappeared back to Africa, leaving the boy to a poor working mother. A working man gives him a violin. A musician looks out a window, sees a black child at his marbles in the street, violin tucked under one arm, and offers lessons. And, still in his telling, that boy grows up to stand at the Crystal Palace, lifting the conductor's baton over a chorus of 800 voices. The point is not the triumph. It's that every link in that chain was luck. Sheer accident, he calls it. A world that leaves genius to accident is running a lottery and calling it a school system. Then he opens the ledger. In 1 year, 1917, by his count, we spent over $96 billion on the war, while education cost us $915 million. His figures, his pairing, his point, roughly 100 to 1. A budget, it turns out, is a confession. The child doesn't get a voice in the ruling of men. The child gets a line in the budget, and the size of that line is where the seeing and the hearing either become real or stand exposed as talk. Not men made into carpenters, he says, but carpenters made into men. Worker, woman, child. By now you can hear it as one demand. Count the people who carry the knowledge and do the work, and fund the child who carries the future, or govern in deliberate ignorance. The essays rest there. The story is where he tests them. So climb the vault stairs one more time. The Comet reads like the experiment the essays designed. That's my reading, not his announcement. Placement proves order, not intent. But the story keeps speaking the essay's own language. Service and being served. Seeing and being seen. Who counts? Take the man from the bottom of the count, delete everyone else, and see what's left. Jim searches the dead city and finds one other survivor. Julia, a white woman from the world of Fifth Avenue, richly gowned, idle by her own account. She'd been shut away in her dark room, developing her photographs of the comet, and stepped out into a house of the dead. Why she survived, the story leaves unconfirmed. The dark room is its only hint, and it stays a hint. They search for anyone else. Harlem first, at Jim's insistence, where he loses everybody. Then her father's office in the Metropolitan Tower, where a note on the desk says he's motored out of the city with a man named Fred. Then the telephone exchange, where no voice answers, and rockets fired into the darkening sky. Nothing. And as the hours pass, something that had organized every second of both their lives starts to lose its grip. The story is exact about what that something was. Julia realizes Jim had seldom even entered her thought before. Not, the story says, because he wasn't human, because his world sat so far from hers that thinking of him almost never happened. You've met that habit of mind already. It stood at a kitchen door, shaking a finger, asking where to get a cook. And the story refuses to pretend the habit dies quietly. At the telephone exchange, left alone for a moment, Julia is seized by the old terror. Alone in a dead city with a man the text calls alien in blood and culture. She runs from him, runs until she's alone among the dead. Then she whirls and flies back, whimpering, the text says, like a child, and walks the last stretch toward him silently. The immediate cause is plain. The terror of being alone among the dead outweighs the fear she was raised in. Whatever else pulls her back, the text leaves open. So when the roof comes, it's been paid for. On top of the Metropolitan Tower, above a city of the dead, the story stages its thesis in a whisper. Death, the leveler, he mutters, and the revealer, she whispers, gently. What the leveling reveals is Jim, standing there, fully human, which he was the entire time. Follow what that means. If the end of the world changed nothing about Jim, and it didn't, then what changed was everything around him. The line was never in nature. It lived in the world. And for a few hours, the world is gone. She sees him, in the story's words, as her brother, humanity. Something older wakes in him, the lone majesty of kings long dead. They move toward each other. They cry, almost with one voice, that the world is dead. And they begin what sounds like a coronation formula, the old cry spoken when one ruler dies and the next is crowned. Long live. And Du Bois cuts the sentence off there. A motor horn finishes the silence. The horn doesn't restore anything by itself. It just announces that the world is coming back up the tower. Fred, the man from her father's note, tells her the truth of the night. Only New York was struck. So the leveling, we learn along with them, was an illusion of scale from the first minute. And the returning world rebuilds the line in a rush of gestures, almost as fast as it can speak. Fred sees who's standing beside her, and his hand flies to his hip. He reduces the man who kept her alive to a slur. Julia answers quietly that he dared all to rescue her, and that she thanks him much. Then, the text says, she did not look at him again. A recognition narrowed to the width of a formality as the crowd is still arriving. Her father is gentler. He presses a roll of bills on the man who saved his daughter, says he's always liked his people, and tells him, if he ever wants a job, to call on him. Gentler, somehow worse. And in the crowd, the word lynch is spoken out loud. One voice pushes back. He's all right. He saved her. Another answers, saved hell. He had no business. The threat is restrained, not dislodged. A snarl, a withdrawal, a tip, a word. No army, no law, no debate. That was the whole bill. Then Du Bois writes the story's last page, and it's not for Julia. A woman the text calls brown, small, and toil-worn mounts the platform with the corpse of a dark baby in her arms, searching the crowd. She calls him Jim. He whirls and catches her with a sob of joy. The man the world wouldn't count, restored to the person who calls him by name, over the body of a child. To me, that baby is the story's most unbearable image of the uncounted, and Du Bois says nothing to soften it. Now, there's a comfortable way to read the Comet, a parable of common humanity beneath the skin, proof that catastrophe shows us we were brothers all along. And Du Bois builds the lure himself. The whisper scene is genuinely beautiful. He wants you leaning toward the fable, so the horn goes through you too. This is where that reading dies. The hours on the roof were real. That's exactly the horror of it. Contact came, extraordinary contact, under an apparent extinction, and the returning world rebuilt the line almost as fast as it could speak. The story isn't a wish, it's a measurement. What it measures is depth. So, the question we opened with. What Du Bois demands is that democracy stop entrenching exclusion. Count everyone. He allows temporary exceptions, he says so, but never permanent ones, because the servant and the woman hold knowledge the state cannot govern without, and the child holds everything the state claims to be building toward. And the comet sits at the end of the same book, showing the demand's true weight. The line survives even the catastrophe Du Bois stages, and my inference from that staging is his warning. Contact and goodwill alone will not reach it. I read the two halves as a claim and its price tag. The essays make the claim, count everyone. The story prices it by showing how deep the thing you're digging at goes, and that contact and goodwill alone won't reach the bottom. So reform, in this book, is necessary and insufficient at the same time, and both words are load-bearing. But the book doesn't call that settled, and neither do I. The horn, the slur, the tip, and the lynching talk are still standing at the end of the story, and one embrace doesn't answer them. And yet, Du Bois didn't stop writing at the embrace. On the book's actual last pages, he set a poem, a hymn to the peoples, which gathers the peoples from every end of the earth and closes by asking, in its words, to make humanity divine. After the horn, a hymn, not an answer. Pressure. If Du Bois is right that the excluded carry knowledge a state cannot govern without, then counting everyone isn't generosity. It's how a democracy learns anything at all, and the hymn is him refusing to quit that claim. But if the Comet is the truer document, if the line runs deeper than counting can reach, then the essays are a eulogy dressed as a platform, and the hymn is grief. I think the essays hold, narrowly, because the book places the measurement after the demands and still ends by asking, but he left the horn in. The staging makes you feel the roof under your feet and hear the world come back. What you owe the people you haven't been counting, with the full price now in view, he leaves to you.